am going to talk to you guys a little bit about The Outsiders and introducing them. You should be watching this video this week as a part of your digital learning, and we're going to be jumping into The Outsiders because we're going to be talking about memoirs for this unit. So The Outsiders is written by S.C. Hinton. It's a very old book, but very, very classic in the sense that it reflects on kind of culture and what culture looks like, and some of it we might still even be able to relate to today, which is why it's a classic. It's timeless. We can still compare it to everything that is going on in the world right now within each and one of our lives. So it's a memoir that we're going to be reading to start off. A fictional memoir means that it's a reading of a detailed personal account of something that happened in somebody's life. Fiction or nonfiction, we learn in library with Ms. Kiesler, fiction means that it's fake. It's not real. Nonfiction means it's not fake, which means it's real. So we've been learning about fake news and well, I guess what they joke around, they call it alternative facts or whatever, which is actually truth, okay? So what's a fictional memoir then, if we put that both together? A fictional memoir is exactly what you think it is. It's a fake memoir. It's remembering someone's memory, but it's not an actual real person, it's a made-up character. So, some of the topics that we look at in The Outsiders, the topics include looking at chaos and order. What chaos have you read so far in The Outsiders up until this point? What kind of order have you seen? We talk about the id, the ego, the superego, basically what people need in order to survive. We talk about moral development, meaning the main character, Ponyboy, we look at how he learns what's right and wrong. Also in this story, it's kind of a coming of age story, meaning when stress happens or something chaotic happens, how do people react in the story? What does this memoir tell us? We talk about the duality of humanity and their potential for good and evil. And the more we read into the story, we look at their surroundings and we look at Ponyboy's surroundings. We look at who he surrounds himself by. Does the environment change the person and who they ought to be? He is raised by his older siblings, as well as his siblings' friends, and he's one of the youngest and in the group, and we talk about the loss of innocence. What does that mean? What are the results of the loss of innocence? Some people compare it to the Easter Bunny. We know that the Easter Bunny doesn't lay eggs, and once we find out that the Easter Bunny doesn't lay eggs, what does that mean? It's kind of life-changing. So what happens when there are no parents around? Ponyboy's parents don't exist in this story. His brothers raise him, and his brother's friends kind of help move him along. So what is it like to have no authority in the house? We talk about herd mentality, and we talk about the reality, the consequences, and the dangers of being in certain groups, certain cliques. We talk about identity and Ponyboy kind of losing himself for a little bit in the story. We talk about violence and we talk about peace. This story has a lot of violence, but there's some internal battles. Again, we go back into the coming of age. There's an internal battle, the duality of humanity between violence and peace. We talk about loyalty and betrayal. We talk about social class. And what does it mean to be manly? And what does good leadership look like? So there's a lot of topics that are explored in this story that are really awesome to bring into life and bring into context to talk, and that's why we're going to be reading The Outsiders. So in our guided reading, what you're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at the difference between different kind of motifs. We're going to look at leadership. We're going to look at identity and not actually labels. We're going to look at what happens when there's no authority and what does good leadership look like. We're going to talk about all of these things, okay? So in this story, where does it take off? When does the story happen? When did the story occur? Did it seem like it occurred back in the 1920s? Or could it seem like it occurs in the 1980s? Or even in the 1990s? Maybe even now. If it relates to any of those years, that's probably why the memoir is made, is to make you really think about when this really happened. Okay? Different types of conflict. In the past, we've talked about a couple different conflicts. We talk about man versus man. We talk about man versus nature, where man versus man is when another person comes into conflict with this person. We talk about nature, meaning animals, plants, survival. If you've ever read the story Hatchet, the story relates very much to it, where the boy tries to survive living in the wilderness. We will be reading Lord of the Flies, and we'll talk about man versus self and how people change, how we have internal battles. We'll also talk about man versus society, where you as the person compare yourself to the rest of society, and how society fights to change a man into what society expects man to be. So we're going to talk a bit more about society expectations throughout this novel.